The rancher took her in for one night, but winter turned her into his bride. The sky had been gray all afternoon, but she had hoped it would hold off until she reached the town she needed to pass through. The roads were usually busy, and in the city, she never worried about snow. But this was different. She was far from the familiar streets, the towering buildings, and the warm lights of home. Here, in the countryside, the landscape stretched endlessly, quiet and lonely, except for the occasional trees swaying under the heavy wind. As she drove, the first flakes began to fall softly, almost like whispers. She thought nothing of it at first, until they became thicker and heavier, quickly covering her windshield despite the wipers moving as fast as they could. Visibility dropped within minutes, and her car slowed down on the slick road. The winter storm was arriving faster than she had expected. Panic started to creep in. She tried calling her friend to explain that she might not make it in time, but there was no signal. Just the sound of the wind, the falling snow, and her own heartbeat. Hours passed, and the snowstorm only grew stronger. The roads, which had seemed manageable at first, were now dangerous, slick, and nearly impossible to see. Eliza's anxiety increased with every mile, and soon she realized that she could not continue safely. Her car slipped slightly on a hidden patch of ice, sending her heart racing. She fought to regain control, but when she reached a small incline, her tires spun and the car slid gently into the soft shoulder. Thankfully, she didn't hit anything, but she was stuck. She tried to push it forward, then backward, but the snow had trapped her completely. The wind howled, shaking the car, and the temperature dropped rapidly. Eliza wrapped her scarf tightly around her neck and turned the heater to the highest setting, but it did little to ease the cold that seemed to seep into her bones. She knew she couldn't stay in the car all night, especially if the storm continued. Her thoughts raced. She had never been in a situation like this before. She could try to wait for another car to pass, but the road was almost deserted. The city was far behind her, and the nearest town was miles away. She felt completely alone. Then, as she stared into the snowy distance, she saw a faint flicker of light. Her heart jumped. At first, she wasn't sure if it was real, maybe just a reflection or a trick of the snow, but the light remained, steady and warm. Hope surged through her. She grabbed her coat and boots from the back seat and stepped out into the cold. The snow was deep, and every step was heavy, but she forced herself forward, following the glow in the distance. She prayed it was a house and not an empty barn or abandoned cabin. It wasn't long before she reached a small ranch house, built sturdy against the harsh winter winds. Smoke curled from the chimney, and the warm light from the windows promised safety and comfort. She hesitated at the door, unsure if she should knock or run away, but she knew she had no other choice. With a trembling hand, she rapped lightly on the wooden door. After a few moments, it opened, revealing a tall man, broad-shouldered, with eyes that were both cautious and kind. He looked as if he had just been checking his animals, wearing worn jeans, a thick flannel shirt, and a heavy coat. "You're lucky you found this place," he said, his voice calm but firm. "It's dangerous out there tonight. Come in before the cold takes you." Eliza nodded, too relieved to speak at first. She stepped inside and immediately felt the warmth of the house wrap around her, a sharp contrast to the biting cold outside. The man introduced himself as Thomas. His presence was strong but not intimidating, and there was a sense of quiet confidence about him that made Eliza feel safer than she had in hours. She explained her situation in short, breathless sentences, telling him about her car, the storm, and how far she had to go. Thomas listened carefully, nodding as she spoke. "You'll be fine here for the night," he said. "The storm doesn't seem like it will let up soon. I can give you some dry clothes and a hot meal while you wait it out." She was touched by his kindness, but part of her felt uneasy. She didn't know him, and she had been warned all her life not to trust strangers. But the storm outside was relentless, and the warmth of the fire and the smell of something cooking in the kitchen made the decision for her. She accepted his help, leaving behind the fear and uncertainty for a short time. While Thomas prepared some food, Eliza sat near the fireplace, letting the heat seep into her frozen fingers and toes. She watched the flames dance, feeling the tension of the past hours slowly leave her body. Thomas returned with a simple meal: bread, cheese, and a steaming cup of tea. It wasn't fancy, but it was nourishing, and the gesture made her heart swell with gratitude. As they ate, they exchanged small talk, talking about the storm, the area, and how winter could be unpredictable. Thomas shared stories about the ranch, about the animals he cared for, and about how he had lived in this remote place all his life. Eliza found herself listening with fascination, realizing how different life could be far from the city. There was a rhythm to his life, a connection with the land, and a patience that she had never experienced before. The snowstorm continued outside, but inside, a quiet sense of calm settled. Thomas showed her to a spare bedroom, insisting she rest. The room was simple, with a warm blanket on the bed and a small lamp casting a soft glow. Eliza felt a mixture of relief and lingering anxiety, but as she lay down, she realized how exhausted she was. The fear of being stranded, the cold, and the tension of the day had drained her completely. Before leaving, Thomas reminded her, "If you need anything, I'll be nearby. Don't worry about a thing tonight." There was no pressure, no awkwardness, just a genuine concern that made her feel safe. Eliza drifted off to sleep with the sound of the wind outside, but for the first time it didn't scare her. Instead, it became part of the world she was temporarily in, a world where strangers could show kindness, and where warmth and safety could be found even in the middle of a snowstorm. That night, Eliza dreamed of the snow-covered fields and the soft glow of the farmhouse, of a world different from the one she had known. She thought about the unexpected path that had brought her here and wondered what the next day would hold. Little did she know, this night would be the beginning of something far greater than shelter from a storm. It would be the start of a connection that neither of them had anticipated, a bond formed in the cold, quiet winter that would change both their lives forever. The snowstorm that had trapped Eliza did not end with the night. Morning came slowly, with gray light filtering through the frosted windows of the farmhouse. Eliza woke to the soft creaking of the house and the smell of fresh bread baking in the kitchen. The warmth of the bed had made her forget, for a little while, the cold and fear from the night before. Now, as she stepped out into the small living area, she realized just how isolated this place was. Outside, the snow stretched endlessly, covering the rolling hills, the fences, and the distant barns. The world seemed frozen in white silence. Thomas was already awake, moving around with practiced ease. He chopped firewood, checked the supplies, and fed the few animals that wandered close to the house. Eliza watched him quietly for a moment, noticing the steady calm in his movements. There was a rhythm to his day that made even the most ordinary tasks seem important. She realized that living here required patience, effort, and a deep respect for the land. In the city, she had been surrounded by noise, fast decisions, and instant gratification. Here, life was slow, deliberate, and unrelenting. "Good morning," Thomas said, noticing her at the doorway. His voice was gentle, but there was a firmness in it that made her feel secure. "Sleep well," Eliza nodded, still a little tired from the long night. "I did, thank you, and thank you again for helping me yesterday." "I don't know what I would have done out there." Thomas shrugged, a faint smile touching his lips. "It's nothing. You'd do the same for someone else, I'm sure, but for now, stay warm. The storm isn't letting up anytime soon and the roads are dangerous." She followed him into the kitchen, where he served her a simple breakfast of eggs, toast, and tea. They ate quietly at first, the only sounds being the wind outside and the occasional clatter of dishes. But soon, conversation began to flow. Thomas asked her about the city she came from, and she shared bits about her work, her friends, and her life in a place full of lights and movement. In return, he told her about his life on the ranch, how he rose early every day, cared for the animals, and kept the land running through the harshest seasons. As the day went on, it became clear that Eliza was not going to leave soon. The storm continued, and the roads remained treacherous. Instead of worrying, she found herself fascinated by this new world. Thomas showed her the way he managed the cattle, how he repaired broken fences, and how even small details mattered in the day-to-day life of the ranch. She listened intently, sometimes helping by handing him tools or observing how he moved. It was hard work, but it felt honest, grounded, and strangely comforting. By afternoon, the snow outside had settled into a thick blanket. Eliza and Thomas worked together, carrying hay to the animals and checking on the horses. The cold bit at her fingers and cheeks, but she refused to complain. Thomas noticed her determination and smiled silently to himself. She was adapting quickly, learning how to handle herself in a place that would have challenged many others. In those quiet moments, they didn't need many words. A glance, a shared smile, or a simple gesture of help spoke volumes. Later, when the chores were done, they returned to the warmth of the house. Thomas prepared a small fire in the living room while Eliza brewed another pot of tea. Sitting together, they began to talk more openly. Eliza shared stories of the city, funny incidents, heartbreaks, moments of doubt and fear. Thomas listened without judgment, his eyes attentive, showing genuine interest in her words. In turn, he shared his own stories, not just about the ranch, but about the life he had chosen, the sacrifices he had made, and the quiet happiness he found in simplicity. Eliza began to see a side of him she hadn't noticed at first. He was strong, yes, and independent, but also thoughtful, patient, and deeply compassionate. There was a gentleness in the way he spoke to the animals, in how he treated her, and in the way he moved through his world. She realized that living in this remote place had not made him cold or distant. It had shaped him into someone resilient, grounded, and capable of caring deeply. As the afternoon turned into evening, the storm finally began to ease. Snow still fell lightly, but the wind had calmed. Outside, the world looked like a quiet painting, white, sparkling, and untouched. Eliza looked out of the window, marveling at the beauty of it. The city had its lights, its noise, and its energy, but it had never offered her a view like this. She felt a strange sense of peace, a feeling that she was exactly where she needed to be. Thomas noticed her staring out the window. "It's beautiful, isn't it?" he said. Eliza turned to him with a smile. "Yes, I've never seen anything like it. It's calming in a way I didn't expect." He nodded, a small smile of his own appearing. "Winter here has a way of doing that. It slows things down, makes you notice what really matters." That night, as they sat by the fire, the warmth and comfort of the house wrapped around them. They shared stories, laughed softly, and occasionally fell into comfortable silence. Eliza realized that she was beginning to feel a connection with Thomas, a feeling she hadn't anticipated. It wasn't romance yet, not in the way people often described it, but it was something gentle, growing, and undeniable. It was trust, admiration, and a quiet companionship that felt both new and familiar. Later, Thomas offered her the spare bedroom again. She noticed a flicker of hesitation in his eyes, as if he was unsure about leaving her alone in the house. But he didn't say much, only reminding her to call him if she needed anything. As she lay down, she thought about the day, about how different it had been from anything she expected. A storm had brought her here, a stranger had offered her shelter, and a quiet connection was beginning to form. Eliza realized that she was learning more about herself in these hours than she had in months back home. She discovered strength she didn't know she had, a curiosity about life far from the city, and a growing respect for a man who lived fully in a world so unlike hers. She felt a mix of gratitude and wonder. Gratitude for the kindness shown to her, and wonder at the possibility that her life could be more than the routine she had accepted. As she drifted off to sleep, The soft snow falling outside seemed to whisper possibilities. Tomorrow, the roads might clear. She might leave and return to her old life. But for now, she was here, safe, warm, and learning that life could surprise her in ways she had never imagined. And in that quiet winter farmhouse, surrounded by snow, fire, and the presence of someone who had become unexpectedly important, Eliza felt the beginnings of something new, a connection, a trust, and the faint stirring of feelings that could grow into something more. The winter. Outside showed no mercy, and the days that followed tested both Eliza and Thomas in ways neither had expected. Snow continued to fall heavily, and the wind blew with a sharpness that made even the simplest tasks difficult. The ranch, though sturdy and well-built, required constant attention. Cattle had to be fed, water had to be kept from freezing, and fences had to be checked and repaired before they collapsed under the weight of snow. Eliza quickly realized that living in the country, especially in winter, was far more demanding than she had ever imagined. Thomas rose early each morning, as he always did, before the sun had fully peaked over the horizon. Eliza, though tired, joined him as best she could. At first, she moved slowly, unsure of what was required or how to handle the cold and labor. Thomas was patient, showing her how to lift hay without straining her back, how to shovel paths through the snow, and how to keep the animals calm and fed. He never rushed her or made her feel inadequate, even when she fumbled with heavy tools or slipped on the icy ground. Instead, he offered encouragement in a quiet, steady voice, guiding her without judgment. Day after day, Eliza's confidence grew. She learned to manage the chores, understanding the rhythm of life on the ranch. By mid-morning, she could carry buckets of water, chop firewood, and check the fences without hesitation. Thomas watched her progress with silent pride. She was determined, resilient, and surprisingly adaptable. Her initial fear of the harsh environment was replaced with a quiet determination, and he admired her for it. He realized that this woman, stranded by chance in a snowstorm, had become more than a temporary guest. She had become a partner in facing winter's challenges. The bond between them deepened through shared hardship. One afternoon, a heavy gust of wind had knocked down part of the fence near the pasture where the cattle were kept. The animals were anxious and restless, their low moans carried across the snow-covered fields. Thomas and Eliza raced to the area, hands numb from the cold, to secure the fence before any of the cattle escaped or injured themselves. Together, they lifted heavy wooden planks, hammered posts into place, and tied ropes where the fence had split. Their movements were synchronized, instinctive, as if they had been doing this together for years rather than a few days. By the time they finished, both were exhausted and covered in snow, but the satisfaction of having saved the animals and repaired the fence was immense. They stood side by side, breathing heavily, and Thomas looked at Eliza with newfound respect. "You're stronger than you realize," he said simply. Eliza smiled, feeling warmth beyond the fire burning inside the house. It wasn't just pride. It was the recognition that they could face challenges together, support each other, and overcome obstacles as a team. The evenings became a time of quiet reflection. After long, tiring days, they would sit by the fire, sharing simple meals and talking about life. Eliza found herself opening up more than she had ever done with strangers. She told Thomas about her childhood, her fears, her dreams, and the disappointments that had shaped her. He listened attentively, offering advice only when asked and never interrupting or judging. She began to understand him better too, his quiet determination, his patience, and the gentle strength that defined him. She realized that Thomas was a man who lived fully in the present, who cared deeply for those around him, and who found joy in simple things. One evening, after the chores were done, and a pot of stew simmered on the stove, Thomas shared a story about the first winter he had spent on the ranch alone after his father had passed away. The storm had trapped him in the same way it had trapped Eliza, and he had learned the importance of resilience, planning, and patience. Eliza listened, captivated by his words, seeing not just the man before her but the life he had built and the challenges he had overcome. She realized that this was more than just physical strength. It was emotional endurance, the ability to remain calm and steady in the face of hardship. As the days passed, the snow began to feel less like an enemy and more like a companion that tested their resolve. Eliza discovered a strength within herself she hadn't known existed. She could rise before sunrise, feed the animals, chop wood, and walk through deep snow without complaint. Thomas noticed how her hands became calloused from hard work, yet her determination never wavered. In those moments, he saw her not just as a guest, but as someone capable of handling life on the ranch, someone he could trust and rely on. One particularly cold afternoon, a calf had gotten stuck in a drift of snow near the far end of the pasture. Its frightened cries carried across the wind, and Thomas and Eliza ran to help. The snow was deep, and every step was a struggle, but together they reached the calf. Thomas lifted it gently while Eliza cleared the snow from around it. The calf trembled from fear and cold, but the warmth of their hands soon calmed it. When they finally returned it to the shelter, both were covered in snow and exhausted, but the sense of accomplishment and teamwork was stronger than any fatigue. That evening, as they cleaned themselves by the fire, Eliza realized how much she had changed. Just a few days ago, she had been a frightened stranger, unfamiliar with the cold and harshness of winter life. Now, she was capable, confident, and part of this world. Thomas noticed it too, the way she moved, the way she spoke with quiet authority, and the care she showed to every creature on the ranch. It was clear that the storm had not just brought them together. It had forged a bond through shared effort, respect, and mutual reliance. Slowly, the connection between them grew beyond trust and companionship. Eliza found herself thinking about Thomas more often, noticing his quiet gestures of kindness, the way he ensured she was warm, how he offered her the best portions of food, or how he would glance her way when he thought she wasn't looking. She realized that admiration was turning into something gentler, something deeper than she had expected. Thomas, in turn, found himself looking for reasons to be near her, appreciating her courage, humor, and the way she seemed to bring light into his solitary world. One night, after a long day of clearing snow from the barn roof, they sat together on a bench near the fire pit outside the house. The cold air bit at their faces, but the warmth of their closeness kept the chill at bay. They didn't speak much at first, simply watching the snowflakes fall silently around them, each flake catching the firelight and sparkling. Then Thomas said quietly, "Winter has a way of showing what matters. The storm, the work, the quiet moments, it all makes you notice who you want by your side." Eliza felt a flutter in her chest. She didn't answer immediately, unsure of her own feelings, but the truth was clear. This was not just a temporary connection. It was the beginning of something real. The harshness of winter had forced them into each other's lives, but it had also allowed them to see who they truly were. They were stronger together, capable of facing challenges, and slowly discovering an affection that neither had expected to find. By the time the night settled fully, with stars twinkling over the snow-covered fields, Eliza felt a sense of peace she hadn't known before. The storm had tested her, the work had exhausted her, and yet she had discovered courage, strength, and a growing admiration for the man beside her. Thomas, too, felt a quiet satisfaction. He had not only shared his home and life, but had found someone who could meet him in this world, someone who could understand and respect the demands of life on the ranch. Winter was far from over, but for the first time, Eliza felt she belonged somewhere remote, harsh, yet full of life, warmth, and unexpected connection. What had started as a simple act of shelter had grown into companionship, trust, and the early stirrings of love, shaped by the trials of cold, snow, and shared effort. Both knew that the days ahead would continue to test them, but they also knew that together they could face anything that winter, or life, might bring. Winter had started to soften, though the cold still lingered in the early mornings and evenings. The heavy snow that had once covered the fields and roads had begun to melt slowly, revealing the frozen grass and brown earth beneath. Eliza and Thomas had grown accustomed to the rhythm of ranch life together. Days were filled with chores and care for the animals, while evenings offered warmth, food, and quiet companionship. But now, as spring approached, a new tension settled in, one that neither of them could ignore. Eliza knew that sooner or later she would have to return to the city. Her life, her work, and her responsibilities awaited her, and though she had grown attached to the ranch, she could not escape the reality that this temporary stay could not last forever. She tried to push the thought from her mind, focusing on daily tasks and the chores that still needed attention. But each evening, as they sat by the fire or watched the snow melt into slush outside, the question of leaving crept back into her thoughts. Thomas sensed it too. He noticed the quiet pauses in her conversation, the faraway look in her eyes as she stared out at the melting fields, and the subtle hesitation in her movements. Though he rarely spoke of his feelings, the thought of losing her weighed heavily on his mind. He had spent years alone, focused on the ranch and its demands, never imagining that someone like Eliza could enter his life so completely. Now, the possibility of her leaving created a tension he could not ignore. One afternoon, after feeding the cattle and checking the fences, Thomas suggested they take a walk across the fields. The snow had melted enough to reveal the soft earth beneath, and the sunlight, though weak, cast a warm glow over the land. Eliza agreed, eager to enjoy the fresh air and the quiet beauty of the ranch. As they walked side by side, the crunch of snow and mud beneath their boots was the only sound. For a moment, neither spoke, allowing the serenity of the landscape to fill the space between them. Finally, Thomas broke the silence. "Eliza, I need to ask you something," he said, his voice low but steady. "I know this winter brought you here by chance. I also know you have a life waiting for you elsewhere. But I need to know how you feel about being here, about being with me." Eliza's heart skipped a beat. She had expected this conversation, yet now that it had come, she found herself at a loss for words. She thought of the first night she had entered the farmhouse, terrified and alone, and how far she had come since then. She thought of the long days working together, the shared laughter, the quiet conversations by the fire, and the moments of understanding that had built an unspoken bond between them. She realized that in these past weeks she had found something she hadn't expected, a place where she felt safe, valued, and even loved. She began, searching for the right words. "I don't know how to explain it. I came here by accident, caught in the storm, but these weeks, this place, it feels like I belong here. I didn't expect it, but I don't want to leave. Not yet." Thomas looked at her, a mixture of relief and joy in his eyes. "Eliza, I've felt the same way for a while, but I didn't know how to say it. I was afraid you'd leave before I had the chance. I don't want to lose you. Not now, not ever." The honesty in his words filled Eliza with warmth, a feeling that spread through her like sunlight after a long winter. She realized that her fear of leaving the city had been replaced by a desire to stay, to explore what this connection could become. The companionship, trust, and respect they had built through hardship had blossomed into something deeper. Love, she realized, had quietly entered her heart, shaped by shared struggle and the quiet moments between them. Over the next few days, their conversations became more open, more honest. They spoke of their hopes, their fears, and the life they could imagine together. Eliza confessed that the city, with all its noise and distractions, no longer felt like home. Thomas admitted that he had always lived a solitary life, but he realized that sharing it with someone like her made it richer, fuller, and more meaningful. They discussed practicalities too, how they would manage the ranch together, what responsibilities each would take, and how they could build a life together without losing their individuality. Despite the joy and excitement of acknowledging their feelings, there were moments of uncertainty. Eliza wondered if she was ready for such a permanent change, if she could leave her old life behind. Thomas worried that he had moved too quickly, that she might regret staying once the novelty of the ranch faded. But these fears, rather than driving them apart, brought them closer. They learned to communicate, to reassure each other, and to listen with empathy. Each conversation strengthened their trust and commitment. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky with shades of orange and pink, Thomas took Eliza's hand and led her to the small hill behind the house. From there they could see the entire ranch, the fields stretching to the distant trees and the last patches of snow glistening in the fading light. He turned to her, his expression earnest and tender. "Eliza," he said softly, "I know this winter brought us together by chance. But I can't imagine my life without you now. I want you here not just for a season but forever. Will you stay with me? Will you be my wife?" Tears filled Eliza's eyes as she looked at him, feeling a rush of emotions: love, joy, gratitude, and certainty. She had come here lost and alone, uncertain of her path, but now she understood where she truly belonged. She nodded, unable to speak at first, then whispered, "Yes, Thomas, I want to stay. I want to be with you." They embraced, the cold wind forgotten as warmth and love surrounded them. In that moment, the past hardships, the snowstorms, and the long days of labor all seemed to have led to this: an affirmation of their bond, a promise of a shared future, and the beginning of a new chapter in both their lives. The days that followed were filled with planning and excitement. They spoke of how the wedding would be simple, yet meaningful, reflecting the life they had come to love on the ranch. They discussed their hopes for the future: raising animals together, maintaining the land, and building a home filled with warmth, love, and laughter. Friends and neighbors, once distant or unfamiliar, were now welcomed into their lives, sharing in the joy and anticipation of their union. Eliza also realized that the connection they shared went beyond romance. It was rooted in trust, respect, and the understanding that they could face any challenge together. The hardships of winter had tested them, showing them the strength of their partnership and the depth of their feelings. Each chore, each cold morning, and each shared struggle had shaped a love that was real, resilient, and enduring. As winter finally gave way to the promise of spring, the world outside reflected the changes within. The snow melted, revealing the rich soil and green shoots of new growth. The sun shone brighter, warming the land and lifting spirits. Eliza and Thomas, hand in hand, felt a sense of renewal, hope, and anticipation. Their love, born in the cold and tested by hardship, had emerged stronger, ready to face whatever the future might bring. Eliza thought back to the night she had first arrived at the farmhouse, shivering and uncertain. She could hardly believe how much her life had changed since then. She had come seeking shelter for a night, but winter had brought her something far greater: a home, a purpose, and a love she had never imagined. Thomas had not only offered her safety, he had offered her a life, and she had chosen to embrace it fully, with courage, trust, and an open heart. Together, they looked toward the future, knowing that challenges would come, but confident in the bond they had built. Love, trust, and shared effort had turned strangers into partners, and winter into the season that shaped the story of their lives. They had learned that true connection is forged not in comfort or ease, but in facing life's difficulties together, supporting each other, and choosing one another every day. Spring had arrived at last, and with it came a sense of renewal and hope. The snow had melted completely, leaving behind fresh green grass, soft earth, and the first signs of flowers pushing their way through the thawed soil. The ranch, once covered in a thick blanket of snow, now glimmered in the sunlight, alive with color and movement. The animals, too, seemed to sense the change in the season, grazing happily in the pastures and moving with a lightness that had been missing during the harsh winter. For Eliza, spring brought a new feeling, a sense of belonging and purpose. She had adapted completely to life on the ranch, learning every task with care and determination. She woke early each morning, helping Thomas feed the animals and prepare the land for the growing season. She chopped firewood, mended fences, and even learned to ride the horses confidently, skills she had never imagined herself having. The physical work, once daunting, now felt like a rhythm she had come to love. It connected her to the land and to Thomas, and it reminded her of the strength she had discovered within herself during the long winter. Thomas noticed every small change in her, the confidence in her movements, the ease with which she handled the animals, and the way she smiled with genuine happiness at the simple joys of ranch life. He felt a deep sense of pride and gratitude. Winter had brought them together, yes, but spring had cemented their partnership in a way that neither could have predicted. They had faced the cold, the storms, and the endless work side by side, and now they were ready to face the world together with a shared purpose and love. The wedding was simple, just as they had both wanted. It was held in the small clearing behind the farmhouse, where the snow had melted to reveal a carpet of green grass dotted with wildflowers. Friends and neighbors were invited, people who had watched the couple through the harsh winter and seen the bond that had grown between them. The ceremony was filled with warmth, laughter, and quiet emotion. Thomas stood tall, dressed simply but neatly, his eyes never leaving Eliza. She wore a modest dress that complemented the natural beauty of the surroundings, and when she looked at him, her heart swelled with love and certainty. During the ceremony, they exchanged vows that were true to their lives, simple yet deeply meaningful. Thomas promised to care for Eliza, to support her dreams, and to face life's challenges together. Eliza promised to stand by him, to respect the land and the life they were building, and to love him through every season. There were no grand speeches or extravagant gestures, just the honest, heartfelt words that had grown from months of shared experience. As they said their final vows and embraced, the crowd cheered softly, and the couple felt a profound sense of peace and fulfillment. After the ceremony, the celebration continued at the farmhouse. Simple dishes, prepared with care, were shared, and laughter echoed through the warm rooms. Eliza found herself surrounded by people who had become more than acquaintances. They were friends, supporters, and witnesses to the life she and Thomas had built together. Thomas introduced her as his wife with pride, and the neighbors smiled, seeing how perfectly she fit into his life. For the first time in years, both felt completely at home, not just in the house or on the ranch, but in each other's presence. Life after the wedding settled into a comforting routine, but it was anything but ordinary. Each day brought its own challenges and rewards. The ranch required constant care, and both Thomas and Eliza worked together to ensure the animals were healthy, the fences were secure, and the land remained fertile. They planted new crops, repaired old barns, and prepared for the seasons ahead. Yet amidst the work, they always found time for each other, sharing quiet moments by the fire, walking through the fields, and talking about their hopes and dreams for the future. Eliza discovered that love on the ranch was not always romantic gestures or grand declarations. It was found in small, everyday acts, making sure the fire was warm, preparing a meal after a long day, lending a hand with chores, or simply sharing a look of understanding across the kitchen. Thomas showed her that true partnership meant working together, supporting each other, and appreciating the quiet beauty of life as it unfolded. Every day strengthened their bond, building a foundation of trust, respect, and love that would endure through any hardship. One afternoon, as they walked through the fields checking on the animals, Thomas paused and looked at Eliza. "You know," he said with a soft smile, "I never imagined winter could bring me so much. Not just the snow or the work or even the challenge, but you. I can't imagine life without you. Eliza's heart warmed. She had felt the same way for months, but hearing him say it aloud made the feeling even stronger. I feel the same, she replied. Winter was hard, yes, but it showed me where I belong, here, with you, on this land. This is home now for both of us. As spring turned into early summer, they continued to nurture both the ranch and their relationship. They welcomed the new life of the season, calves born in the pasture, birds returning to the trees, and flowers blooming in colors that had been hidden under the snow. Each new growth was a reminder of the resilience and perseverance that had carried them through the winter, and of the love that had blossomed quietly during those long, snowy days. Their life together was far from easy, but it was full of meaning. The hardships they had faced in winter had strengthened their partnership, teaching them patience, compassion, and the value of shared effort. They learned to celebrate victories, however small, and to comfort each other during difficult times. Through it all, their love grew steadily, rooted not in fleeting passion but in respect, understanding, and the joy of facing life together. Evenings remained their favorite time. After long days working in the fields or tending to the animals, they would sit by the fire, sharing stories, planning future projects, or simply enjoying the quiet companionship of being together. Sometimes they would walk under the stars, the clear night sky stretching endlessly above them, feeling connected not just to each other, but to the land and the life they had built. The ranch, once a place of work and survival, had become a sanctuary of love, peace, and shared purpose. Eliza often reflected on how far she had come, from the frightened, stranded woman who had knocked on Thomas's door during a snowstorm, to a confident, capable partner who had found a home and love she never expected. Thomas, too, reflected on the change in his life. He had gone from solitude and routine to companionship, laughter, and joy. The storm that had brought them together seemed almost miraculous in retrospect, as if fate had used winter's harshness to guide them to each other. They understood that life would continue to bring challenges, that the land required work, and that the seasons would not always be gentle. But they also knew that together, they could face anything. The lessons learned in winter, the resilience, the patience, and the quiet strength, remained with them, guiding their decisions and deepening their love. Each day was an opportunity to nurture the ranch, their relationship, and the shared life they had chosen. As the first summer days arrived, Eliza and Thomas stood together on the porch of the farmhouse, looking out over the vibrant, thriving ranch. The sun shone brightly, the air was filled with the scent of fresh grass and wildflowers, and the animals moved happily across the fields. Eliza rested her head on Thomas's shoulder, feeling the warmth of the sun and the steady presence of the man who had changed her life. "I never imagined life could be like this," she said softly. "Not just the ranch, but us. I'm happy here, Thomas, more than I've ever been." Thomas kissed her forehead gently. "Neither did I, Eliza. But now every day is better because we face it together. This is our life, our home, and our love, and nothing could be better than that." In that moment, the world seemed perfect. The hardships of winter, the snowstorms, and the uncertainty that had brought them together were now memories of lessons learned and love found. What began as a single night of shelter had transformed into a lifetime of partnership, trust, and joy. The ranch had become more than a home. It had become a place where love grew, hearts healed, and a future together was built on the strongest foundation of all shared experience, mutual respect, and enduring care. Eliza and Thomas knew that life would continue to change, that storms would come again, and that challenges would arise. But they also knew that no matter what, they would face it side by side. Winter had turned a single night of kindness into a lifelong bond, and the warmth of that connection would carry them through every season to come. Their love, forged in hardship and nurtured with care, had become the heart of the ranch, the center of their lives, and the promise of countless days filled with hope, joy, and togetherness. And so, as the sun set over the green fields, painting the sky with golden hues, Eliza and Thomas embraced, ready to step into their future as partners, as lovers, and as two hearts united by fate, perseverance, and the extraordinary power of winter's unexpected gift.